possibly could join us. Charles Taylor.
Chuck Taylor.
Chuck Taylor. Okay, Laurie Searles here. Vincent Pettis. Mike Rosales. Sam Trimble is possibly going to join us later, and Michael Nahara will join us later as well, and Gary Gondra will be absent due to personal issues.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. And with that, gentlemen, I'd like to move to the pledge to the flags, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you very much. I apologize, that's fine. And that would take us to our next agenda item, the election of board officers for 2019. And I'd like to open the floor for nominations, please.
Chairman, I'd like to nominate you as chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rosales. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Ellis, can I nominate, or do we do one at a time?
Sure, go ahead.
I'd like to nominate Vince Pettis.
Okay. And is there a second for Mr. Pettis?
I guess I'll second that.
Okay, you'll second that. And so we've got 4 board chairmen. Laurie Searles, all in favor? Aye. Against?
Aye.
Well, Mr. Pettis is sort of 3-2, so I believe that you want to take the vote or move forward?
Well, I guess if other board members show up, could we, I guess, move to reconsider this item when we have more board members?
I'd rather we didn't. I'd like to move forward.
Okay, well, I guess we can take a vote.
So we've got Mr. Vince Pettis, who would like to be chairman. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Aye.
Okay.
And I believe that's 3-2.
I wasn't clear on Mr.
I wasn't
Taylor's
either.
vote,
Mr.
so
Taylor,
Mr.
did you vote for myself or for Mr. Pettis?
I voted for you.
Thank you, sir. 3-2. And the next position we have is vice chair. I'd like to open the floor for nominations, please.
I'll nominate Vince Pettis.
I second.
Any other nominations? I'd like to close the floor on that. And all in favor of Vince Pettis being vice chair?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none. Mr. Pettis, congratulations. And I'd now like to open the floor for nominations for secretary of the board. And I'd like to nominate Mr. Rosales.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Any other nominations? With that, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Rosales.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, board. And we'll move on to our next agenda item, the public comment. Has anyone signed up for public comment?
No, ma'am.
No? Okay. Then we've got the approval and signing of the minutes from February 21st, 2019. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, sir. And a second?
Second.
Mr. Rosales has moved and Mr. Taylor has seconded to approve the signing of the minutes from February 21st, 2019 meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. Thank you. And that would take us to review and approval of the financial report for January 2019. Are there any questions? Would you like to present?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening, Rosa Goldman, Chief Financial Officer. We are presenting the report for January 2019. The report contains the balance sheet, report of revenues, expenditures, and changes in cash balance, investment report, and the note to the financial report. For the month of January, we did not have any accounts over budget. The encumbered funds, which is the litigation reserve, is still at the same amount, meaning no amounts have been taken out of that fund. Are there any questions?
Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Mr. Pettis moved to approve, and Mr. Rosales seconded that. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, thank you. That'll take us to our monthly health benefit report.
Okay, for the month of January, there were deposits of $106,996 plus $27,468 for the stop loss reimbursement. So that gives us a balance as of January 31st of $290,067.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions, gentlemen?
Thank you.
Hearing none, thank you. That would take us to our EPCAD department presentations.
Yes, ma'am. Board members, usually in March, before the notices go out, myself, the Director of Evaluation, James Thompson, and Assistant Chief David Stone, we go out and start visiting with the taxing entities to let them know what we're seeing and what's going on, and we feel like we need to do the same thing with our Board of Directors. So what we've done is we've got our 4 major appraisal departments that are going to do about a 10 to 15-minute presentation on each department. We're going to start with Michelle Martinez with the commercial department. Then we'll go to Mr. Jorge Rodriguez with the business personal property, Ms. Crystal Pickett with the residential, and then we're going to tie it all up with Mr. Bill Gonzalez, and he's going to give a presentation and a little bit of class of what the property value study is and what our methods and procedures review is and how we have to go about it with the state comptrollers. So sit back, relax, and hopefully learn something. I'll say enjoy it, but I don't know how that will go. We'll see. Okay, we'll start with Ms. Martinez.
Good evening. Congratulations to you and your new positions or existing positions. Again, my name is Michelle Martinez. I am the manager in the commercial department. I've been the manager for 6 years now. I've been with the district for 16. I am a UTEP graduate, and like some of the other staff here, I do have an engineering degree. Tonight I'm going to provide you some insight into who we, the appraisal staff, are and what we in the commercial department do. Let me begin with our motto, which is professionals putting people first. And as you might already know, we are a very public-friendly office. We strive to provide the best customer service that we can at all times while educating everyone who walks in the door or calls us up on the phone. This is the putting people first part of our motto. But you might ask, why do we call ourselves professionals? Is this merely a philosophy of how we work? And no, it's not. Currently, we have 60 employees who are licensed by the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. That's almost half of the staff here at EPCAD. 45 of us, I don't know if you can see this here. 45 of us have attained the RPA designation, which stands for Registered Professional Appraiser. This table outlines the educational experience requirements for every license level up to RPA. By the time we become certified, we have spent 170 hours, oftentimes more, in the classroom. We have also been working as appraisers for at least 3 years. Once we attain the RPA, we must complete continuing education every 2 years just to maintain that designation. So this isn't any different from many of the other professional licenses that you can attain in Texas. In fact, the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board only requires 1,000 hours of experience and 150 hours of education to become a licensed residential appraiser. At the bottom, you can see that the property tax consultant, by stark contrast to our requirements, only needs to take a 1-week course of 40 hours and an exam to become certified or to become licensed as a property tax consultant. So the job of appraiser is a multifaceted and complex one. The appraiser needs to be able to perform widely differing duties throughout the year. The most well-rounded individuals will be the most successful. Not only must we be able to think critically, we must be able to communicate effectively and be able to handle ourselves in high-pressure situations. We must be master time managers, be confident and decisive, and we must have integrity and respect for the public that we serve. Clearly, the appraisal workforce requires a substantial investment of time and money to the CAD. It takes years for an appraiser to reach peak operating potential, and it hurts the organization when they leave for better opportunities. Job-specific training and career development are important factors in keeping a highly skilled workforce engaged. Improvements in employee engagement have a direct positive impact on productivity and retention. To that end, Dinah has created a dedicated classroom for us here in the building. We use it for our regular required classes as well as additional training. We host classes for the International Association of Assessing Officers every year. In addition to our staff, appraisers from all over North America, including Canada, travel to El Paso to attend these classes. We have also implemented peer-led classes where appraisers teach each other in a classroom setting. Sometimes we'll hold interdepartmental training to share information. Often a senior staff member will lecture on topics specifically chosen by the appraisers as areas of weakness for them. The appraisers respond very well to this training and cite it as one of the best aspects of the job. The planning and organizing of work here at the CAD follows the Texas property tax calendar, which is composed of 3 distinct phases throughout the year. The first phase, the discovery phase, usually spans between mid-August and February, and during this time we're conducting field checks and verifying sales information. Texas is a non-disclosure state, and we treat the verification process similar to how salespeople treat leads. So we talk to 100 people, and maybe 2 of us will give us information. Concurrently to this, we are also taking our classes and certification exams. And of course, we are always assisting taxpayers, regardless of the time of year. The appraisal phase begins in February and ends when all the notices are actually mailed. This is when we are largely testing and finalizing our values, as well as processing renditions. Sometimes we are working on special projects like reappraisals per the property tax code or for entities such as MUDs. The equalization phase, or the hearing season, as we like to call it around here, begins a few weeks after our first notices are mailed. And due to legislative changes, this creates an overlap with the appraisal phase because we are still finalizing values when the equalization phase begins. During the equalization phase, we are very much interacting with the public, the ARB, and tax agents in person, over the phone, and via email. We are also producing and reviewing evidence in open hearings. During the months of June and July, we extend our work week to 6 days just to make sure that every taxpayer that protests gets a hearing. This is the most strenuous time of year for most of us, but we do pull together and make sure everyone carries the load. To this end, we also strive to minimize days out of office, particularly June and, anyway. So as a manager, I can go on and on about staffing and planning, but in the interest of time, I'll wrap that up and speak more specifically about the commercial department. The commercial department deals daily with a wide spectrum of properties, from vacant commercially zoned land to hotels and motels and shopping centers, large apartment complexes and industrial offices, hospitals, movie theaters, bars, and restaurants. From Tornillo to Anthony and everywhere in between, one could say commercial properties are almost as varied as people are. The complexity and size of commercial properties make field reviews quite detailed and extensive, and because of this, we average 8 to 10 reviews per day in the field. Our workflow begins with identification of the properties to review. We field check properties with new construction, largely identified by permits and Dodge reports. We recheck properties per owner request or perhaps neighboring property owners. We also try to field check every property that sold in the last year. We also review groups of properties by class due to equity considerations. Once we're out in the field, we measure any new improvements and verify measurements of any existing improvements. We interact with the contractors to attain cost data, expected completion dates, and possibly access to the blueprints. If available, we speak with owners to verify the sale and rent data. If only tenants are on the site, we try to talk to them about rents and the economics of the area. We observe and document any unique characteristics of the property, as well as the surrounding area. The appraisers then must update the database for every property that they field checked. This is our opportunity to review and analyze the data on an individual basis in the light of the unique characteristics noted in the field. According to our records, there were 321 new commercial construction permits, which is the dark gray, and the 629 finish-out permits issued during 2018, which is the teal. Together, it's a total of about 950. We have reviewed 4,700 accounts for 2019. Permits comprised about 20% of them. Field reviews are not without difficulty and require a certain amount of fortitude. This job is not for everyone and honestly takes a special type of person to be willing to overcome the many obstacles we encounter in our day-to-day. We have had many people quit soon after realizing what the job requires. Many of these factors affect all of our appraisers and not just commercial. I think it's important to be aware of the daily challenges staff faces in their efforts to perform their duties. Weather, animals, and log gates are just examples of factors that can impede our progress. Public opinion is also a major factor we contend with and actually sometimes puts us in danger. Safety is a culture, and whenever we are on a construction site, our safety concerns are the same as any construction worker. CAD issues all the safety equipment you see here to field appraisers. Oftentimes, the appraisers will buy themselves steel-toe boots as well because we are not allowed onto some sites without them. The device that you're seeing on the right is a GPS emergency beacon that we now carry with us at all times. We have had some scary incidents in the field, and due to that, CAD has partnered with the company Spot to provide anyone going to the field a help button, even if they are out of cell phone range. If they feel threatened or in danger, they can hit that SOS button and authorities are notified with GPS coordinates and admin is notified via email. Here's some just examples of the things that we encounter every day, from scaffolding and equipment to uneven sites, nails, and dogs. I mean, I don't think there's an appraiser here that doesn't have an anecdote about a dog encounter in the field.
Or having a rifle aimed at you.
Or at least threatened.
Yeah, that's happened.
Okay, so this building on the left, we're looking for volunteers to help us go measure that in the field. If anybody wants to come help us, just let me know. Sometimes we can get blueprints from the city or the contractor complicated properties like this. But even if we do, we still have to verify the measurements because sometimes the blueprint can be modified during construction. So properties like this, you can see where it would take a few hours to just for this one property to field check. So again, the commercial department staff of 14 people conducted over 4,700 reviews for 2019 between field checks and using pictometry in-house. Maintenance of our appraisal records is paramount for defensible values, and it's difficult to overcome our burden of proof during appeals without updated records. Each account that we review could potentially be analyzed for cost, income, and market, as well as equity. We look at the physical, functional, and economic factors affecting value. If the property can be valued under income, we look for comparable rent data and review the vacancy of the property compared to the sector as a whole. If we have enough sales data, we compare the property to the market. Equity, the property tax code's seemingly fourth approach to value, is also always considered. The burden of proof is on the appraisal district for timely protests at the Appraisal Review Board. Protesters can request to receive CAD's evidence and equity analysis 14 days prior to the hearing, although they are not required to provide any evidence at all. As representatives of the CAD, we are responsible for promulgating our evidence weeks prior to the hearing. We then reach out to the owner or agent by email and telephone to discover what their issues of contention are. If we can settle informally, we will. But oftentimes the protester is an agent working on a contingency and they prefer to take their chances at the board. For that reason, commercial appraisers spend a majority of the equalization phase appearing before the Appraisal Review Board. The hearing may be the first time that we see the owner's or the agent's evidence. It's imperative that we are able to think fast and adjust our arguments around the owner's evidence, either making recommendations or offering rebuttals to the ARB. And remember, we're doing this 6 days a week. This chart shows the timely protest statistics for commercial properties. We have roughly consistent number of timely protests, although we've seen a slight decline in the recent years. And keep in mind that these are only protests that are heard during June and July and doesn't include protests that we hear throughout the rest of the year. This chart illustrates growth in taxable commercial value as well as the increase in number of taxable commercial properties. So the line is the number of commercial properties taxable, and then the bars are the value. The total taxable commercial value in 2018 was just over $10 billion, which represents an increase of 16.5% over 2014. The total number of parcels also increased by 750. Okay. And with that, I want to thank you for your time and reiterate to you that it really takes a special kind of person to be able to perform all the required appraisal duties throughout the different phases of the year. They are truly Renaissance women and men, and I think they deserve all of our support. Thank you very much.
The next slide. Thanks. This is the business personal property. Jorge Rodriguez is going to give you a presentation of this and explain what business personal property is.
Good afternoon, and let me begin by thanking you all for the opportunity for all of us to address you this afternoon. What I'm going to try to do is just go over the 3 phases of our year. Michelle already mentioned what those are: discovery, appraisal, and equalization. And I'm going to go through that fairly quickly. I have been working with the appraisal district for the past 8 years. I've been in ad valorem tax field for 31 years, 23 years of which I was on the dark side. I was a tax consultant. Okay. Having said that, as you can see here, we can begin with the types of property that we appraise. It's varied. There's a wide range of it. You can see on the left side there, it's a convenience store. The second picture there is a small manufacturing. And we have a huge warehouse with full of inventory and automated equipment on the right. So the discovery phase, as Michelle mentioned earlier, runs from August through February. The extent to which taxable personal property can be assessed depends upon its discovery. Discovery of business personal property is difficult because it's very mobile. So the goals we start out with each year, the first one is canvassing the entire county. Okay, we basically reappraise business personal property each year. Even though we're only required to do it every third year, we're out there in the field every year going through the entire county to pick up new accounts and get rid of old ones. So the second goal there is identify new business and interview owners to determine the nature of the business and gather as much data as possible to facilitate appraisal. We also identify businesses that have closed. We do research on those accounts when we get out in the field and they're no longer there to make sure that they just didn't move. So you might have a business out on the east side one year, they move to the west side. We do research to make sure before we delete the account that they're actually out of business. And the last one is to confirm ownership of the existing businesses. Hair salons are a good example of businesses that change hands on a regular basis. Food trucks, they're another example. We've seen where sometimes food trucks switch 3 times over in a single year. So we have to confirm the ownership of these properties. Some of our sources that we use for discovery, El Paso Inc., El Paso Times Business Section, city permits, internet, commercial appraiser field inspections. The commercial department is really good about letting us know when they discover a new business, when there's permit for new construction. They'll let us know businesses are out there, and we'll send an appraiser out there to review that. We also get warehouse listings. El Paso Airport, they provide a list of aircraft hangared at the airport, as well as Delgado Acosta Briones. They do collections for the city. They'll inform us on their field inspections when a business is no longer at the site. Our field work, that's the heart of what we do from August through February. And basically what we do is we generate property cards. We sort them by street from lowest address to highest address, odd and even. So an appraiser will start, say, for example, on Mesa Street on the right side of the street, work their way all the way to the end of Mesa, cross the street over, and then come back the other way. It's a lengthy process. I'll show you a couple of pictures. We have here a field specialist making notes on a new business prior to entering the premises to conduct an interview with the owner or an employee or a staff member. Here we have an appraiser already inside the premises. You can tell from the lady on the right-hand side with a big smile, she's not aware we're from the appraisal district just yet. So our workload, you can see from 2014 to 2018, a steady increase. Last year, total of 24,817 accounts we had to review. In terms of dollars, we've had a steady increase from 2014. Last year, we were at $6.68 billion. Next, we have the rendition phase. We call it the rendition phase. It's actually the appraisal phase, which runs from January to May. You may have noticed our discovery phase runs from August to February, so there's an overlap here. We begin to receive some renditions in January and February, and we're still doing field work at the time. Property Tax Code Section 2201 requires a person to render all tangible personal property used for the production of income that the person owns or that the person manages or controls as a fiduciary on January 1. Further, rendition reports must be delivered to the chief appraiser after January 1 and not later than April the 1st. However, on written request, the chief appraiser can extend the deadline to May 1. In terms of workload, again, this is typically what we receive every year is 15,000 renditions. By the way, this phase of our year is really our hardest time of the year. It's when we get swamped with tons of paperwork, and the time frame for us to process all this is really narrow. And I'll show you. I know we're saying it runs from January through May, but let me show you this pie chart. So from January to March 21, we received 4,106 renditions. Okay, 27% of what we receive every year. From March 22nd to April, 5-week period, we're getting 10,525 renditions. And we need to get all of those processed by mid-May, okay? Just to focus in on it a little bit, last year the rendition deadline actually was April 2nd because April 1st was on a Sunday. And on April 2nd, we received over 7,200 renditions. Everybody waits till the last minute, right? Over and above that, we also process Freeport exemptions. Currently, we have a little over 440 of them. Vehicle allocation applications, we have roughly 100 of those. And then we're also doing the monthly VIT reports, special inventory reports, and we have over 700 of those to work. So, as I stated a little earlier, it's a difficult time for us during this time of year. It's all doom and gloom. The world has gone mad, and we're struggling to get all this work done. I'll show you a couple of renditions just so you get an idea what the reports look like. Here we have a basic rendition. You can see on the left-hand column there, it identifies the property. It'll give you a quantity, how many of the chairs they have, 4 chairs. They give us a good faith estimate of value, and then the actual historical cost, and the year acquired, okay? This rendition here, an appraiser would probably take no more than 5 minutes to work. On the other hand, we also receive renditions like that one, and that's from a leasing company, okay? And the difficulty with this rendition is that every line item has a location address, and the appraiser needs to go in there and identify where it sits so that the various taxing entities can tax this property. So we have tax district codes that'll give you the entities that tax that specific asset. So you can imagine how long it would take to work this. And if you can't, I'll kind of give you a hint here. So 3 years ago, our best appraiser, most experienced appraiser, would take 2.5 days roughly to work that rendition. 2 years ago, however, IT department and our research department collaborated to create a TDC Finder program, which populates an Excel spreadsheet. And by the way, we worked with the leasing companies and asked them not to send their paperwork on PDF, to please send it in Excel format, which allows us to do this. I'd say 98% of the leasing companies do just that. They send an Excel spreadsheet, and so we're able to populate that now pretty quickly. The other thing that happened is the commercial department manager, Michelle, who just spoke to you, she shared an Excel spreadsheet with us that actually populates the depreciation factor and calculates the depreciated value. So what takes place now is that rendition that used to take 2.5 days to work takes us maybe 45 minutes to 1 hour. Big difference. It's still a lot longer than that other rendition, the one that takes 5 minutes, but it's helped us tremendously. And it's actually helped us to the point where we used to run and work renditions all the way to the end of May into June. And now we're finishing mid-May, maybe the 3rd week of May, which allows us to start working our protests, okay? Our informal protests begin in May. We start getting people walking in wanting to work their protests with us informally. In terms of protests, I forgot. Once we're done with our rendition phase, everything's good. For about 2 days till we start our informal hearings, right? Everything's sunny, bright, and good. So here we go. Equalization phase runs from May to July. We don't get that many protests. Why? Because if we worked the rendition and we worked it accurately, we probably came up with a reasonable and fair value. So there's no need for the property owners to protest their property. This is typically what we receive in personal property in terms of protests. 3,000 protests a year, not very many. So that basically covers our 3 phases: discovery, appraisal, and equalization. I thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try and answer.
One of the things I think the board would be interested to know that the businesses that do not render, they receive a penalty on their tax bill of a 10% penalty. If they render fraudulently, it's a 50%. So that's something else that our business personal property appraisers have to watch. We have to keep a running total of those businesses that are running list that did not render, and then if we see something that looks fraudulent, we have to research it, study it, and turn it in. So there are penalties for those. All right, we're going to switch now to residential. This is our biggest property, of course, in El Paso. Ms. Crystal Pickett is going to give you guys a presentation.
Hi, Crystal Pickett. I've been the manager for residential for 6 years. I've been with the CAD for 20 years. Okay. The residential department holds 58% of the total appraisal role in El Paso. Okay. For 2016, the total residential protests that we had was a little over 8,000. 54% of those were settled informally with the appraisers one-on-one with a property owner or a tax agent. 14% went to the board, 23 were withdrawn, and 9, they just didn't show up. For 2017, about the same amount of protests, 45 were settled informally, 20% went to the board, 11 were no-shows, and 24 were withdrawn. Now, both 2016 and 2017 were non-reappraisal years. 2018, we almost doubled in the number of protests that were filed for residential properties. We had 17,000. 40% of those were settled one-on-one with an appraiser. 30% went to the board. 17 were no-shows, and 13% were withdrawn either by property owners or tax agents. The month's inventory, these are as of December of each year. So in 2010, properties were, the inventory for properties was 6 months, a little over 6 months. It's gone down in 2018 to 3.8 months. So the inventory has gone down a lot. I mean, it did hit a high of 7.6 in 2013, and we're less than half of that now.
Mr. Ross?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Is this for unsold homes or?
Yes.
Yes.
This is new homes. This is new homes on the market that are unsold. Yeah. And your average, the state now, used to 5 months was considered an average. Now it's 6 months, isn't it, Crystal? That is considered the new average.
Yeah.
So to be at 3.8% this year is quite a big difference.
And it's actually a little bit lower in the county. This is
because we're not building as many homes, or they're just selling?
Well, and in fact, I'll jump in right now and tell you, I did mention that we're visiting the taxing entities, letting them have an idea of what's going on. And what it is because we're seeing a very active market, and we're seeing the builders not build house after house after house. It's mostly you go in, you see a model home, and then you put in your order, and then they build. So they're building that way. So they've let the inventory drop, which makes it, the demand is still out there, but the supply is less. So what happens? They're worth a little bit more. It bumps it up.
This is just kind of average number of home sales. The blue is 2017 data, 2018 is in black, and then the only thing that we had so far was January sales for 19. And if you see, most of the home sales every year happen between May and July for whatever reason. The next one I have is back in 1990, the average home price was about $120,000. Now it's almost at $180,000. So the average home price has actually increased. This is an example of something that we have to do in residential. This would be a new subdivision that would be going out. It's a total of 109 acres. This was in 2009. This is a part of the Tierra del Este area. This is what it looked like in 2011. It started at 1.2 million, and by the time it was completed in 2014, it was at 72 billion.
I know the board has asked us before, all this vacant land out on the east side and on the west side. This is why we look at it every single year to see if it is just an undeveloped track, and now all of a sudden we're seeing some type of infrastructure going in or some type of measuring going on. So we will look at that every single year until that is totally infilled. And then at that point, we'll look at the market changes. But every year, an appraiser will be out there measuring and making adjustments on the land value as more value gets added to that 109 acres.
So what is residential? Residential is anywhere from a mobile home to the cookie cutter houses, condos, to this. This would be kind of hard to measure. We could measure the front of it. I don't know anybody who would volunteer to actually trek it down to actually measure it, so that's where the plans and the pictometry come into play on something like this. Also with this, from the street view, you wouldn't really be able to see anything, but pictometry does help, especially if something is fenced in and we have no access to it. We use the measuring tool on the pictometry, and it's pretty accurate. So we can actually pick stuff up and actually put some photos in there based on pictometry visits. This is another property via pictometry because we had no access to get in there. So we can actually measure each wall and get as close as possible because we didn't get the plans on this. Another part of residential is agriculture. Agriculture has to have a market value and a productivity value. We've got orchards too, and with the orchards, what also goes into this is the age of the trees. Row crops. So I have a little forecast for 2020. The 2019 values are still being finalized, but we're looking at 2020 being another total reappraisal year for the residential department because we've had a lot of sales occur more than normal. We checked on the permits, and then we finished up working on our county project. We don't get any permits in the county. So in the county, we did go house by house, street by street to make sure that we had the records complete. We picked up a lot of missing houses, a lot of missing additions, and that got added to the appraisal roll. The market has continued to increase since 2016, which has had a direct effect on appraised values. I did talk about the month's inventory, and going forward, we believe that home values will continue to increase. So as long as the market values are, the houses are selling and we're having such a demand for them, then the values are going to continue to increase, which is going to increase the tax base. Thank you.
One of the things to let the board know, when we do our reappraisal plan, we put in that we're going to be looking at different areas and watching the market. When we were working, when our appraisers were working out in the field, especially residential, and they were looking at the data that we had after the hearings of last summer, when we started analyzing all of this, we determined that we needed to have another reappraisal year. So 2019, the law says we have to do it once every 3 years. But as we see changes in the market, we're not going to wait 3 years. Every entity needs to have every dollar that they should have. If the market goes down, we don't want to hold that up for the property owner. So in looking at our data, 2019 is going to be another total reappraisal year. We'll have a lot of residential areas that will be going up, some that will be staying the same, and a few that will be going down. And looking at the market data that we've been working on for 2019, like Ms. Pickett said, we can already see a continuation of this increase. So 2020 and 2021 will follow up with 2021. Each one of those years will be a total reappraisal year until we start seeing the market leveling off. We always reappraise commercial and business property every year. Residential, we really look at how the trends are. El Paso is seeing an increase. You saw that decrease from, what was it, 5.8 months of inventory a year ago to 3.7 or 3.6, I think, in the county. So we will continue that the next this year and the next 2 years and watch it. But I thought the board would want to know that we are, we don't just wait for 3 years. If the market changes, we act on it, and we are doing that this year. So your constituents may say, hey, I got a notice last year. Why am I getting another one this year? Tell them, call the appraisal district and file a protest if they don't like the numbers. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bill Gonzalez. There was a lot of questions. We gave you a bit of a report on the property value study. property value study is a study that the comptroller does to every appraisal district. They come in and they do a random sampling and they check the values. This is for school districts. So we thought we would give you kind of a 101 course on property value study and on the methods and procedures review. All of you have a copy of our last methods and procedures study that the comptroller did, where we passed all of the categories. I know we gave them out then, but we're giving them out again for you to take and use. They just came in and have started their review for the next one, but I'm going to let Mr. Gonzalez kind of run you through this. I think it'll be interesting.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Bill Gonzalez. I'm the statistical coordinator for the appraisal district. I've been with the appraisal district almost 10 years now. Before that, I worked for the comptroller PTAD doing the property value study. And before that, I was a TxDOT right-of-way appraiser. And I have a bachelor's degree in business administration from UTEP. So let me go ahead and get started. I'm going to talk mainly about the property value study, or PVS, and the methods and assistance program, or MAP. First, we'll talk about the property value study. And what is the property value study? It's basically a measure by the state of Texas of equitable distribution of state funding for the school districts and a measure of appraisal district performance. And the primary purpose of the PVS is to ensure equitable distribution of state funding for public education. As Texas funds public education through state and local funds, local funding comes from property taxes. The chief appraiser of each CAD determines local property values, and school districts set tax rates that determine the amount of local tax revenue. Texas bases its funding on the total taxable property value within each school district as determined by the PVS. The results of the property value study can affect the school district's state funding. The secondary purpose of the PVS is to collect data to provide taxpayers, school districts, appraisal districts, and the legislature with measures of appraisal district performance. Now, keep in mind that the property value study only affects school district funding and not other taxing entities. So it's if you're representing a school district, you need to really pay attention to this stuff. And they study various property categories, with like A, which is real property, single family; B, real property, multifamily; C1 is real property, vacant lots and tracts; D1 is real property, acreage and productivity values; D2 and E, which is real property, non-ag, rural acreage at market value, and farm and ranch improvements; F1 is commercial; G is real property, which is oil, gas, and other minerals; J is real and tangible personal property, utilities; and L1 is personal property, which is commercial personal property. And who does the property value study? The Comptroller's Property Tax Assistance Division, or PTAD, is responsible for conducting the PVS, and it is done every other year. And the basic steps involved in conducting the PVS are: step 1, gather and prepare market data, sales, cost, income, etc. Step 2, select a sample using a statistical model designed to achieve a uniform margin of error in each school district to the extent practical. Step 3 is appraise property when necessary, when sales data is not available. Step 4 is match property tax assistance division values with local values. Step 5 is compute property ratios, comparing PTAD values with local values. Step 6 is stratifying by common features, usually value. And step 7 is analyzing the data and reporting the results. And the PVS is a form of ratio study, so the ratio formula that they use is the CAD, or local value, divided by the PTAD value, and that generates the ratio. And the property value study will primarily use sales data over appraisals when possible. Appraisals are done by PTAD when not enough sales are available, and as Texas is a non-disclosure state, sales are very hard to obtain. So commercial properties especially are typically, they do a lot more appraisals than sales as a result. And as far as ratio studies are used to measure appraisal level, variability, reliability, and vertical inequalities. When you talk about measures of appraisal level, you're talking about the median, which is the middle ratio or rate in order of magnitude; the arithmetic mean, which is the average of the ratios, the sum of the ratios divided by the number of ratios; the weighted mean is the ratio of average assessed value to average sale price. The sum of the assessed value is divided by the sum of the sales price, and that gives proportional weight as opposed to equal weight to each parcel. So in other words, the higher value properties are weighed more than the lower value properties on the weighted mean. Measures of variability is the coefficient of dispersion, or COD, which measures the average percentage deviation from the ratios from the median ratio. And there's other measures of variability, like range percentiles, quartiles, and others, but they're not used as often as the COD. Measures of reliability is the degree of confidence placed in a sample, typically better results with larger samples and uniformity of ratios. This may include the confidence interval. And price-related differential for vertical inequalities there is a regressivity, indicates low appraisals on higher value properties, and it's considerably above 1.00 or 100%. And progressivity indicates low appraisals on lower value properties, which is below 100%. The property value study focuses mainly on weighted mean for its measure of appraisal level. It uses the confidence interval to determine if a school district meets the local value. And now I'm going to go to the 2018 property value study preliminary results. And this is the El Paso County summary worksheet, which is all the ISDs. Let's see. You can see, I mean, the A's are at 100, the F's are at 98, and the L's are at 101. So overall, the ratios are not bad. They're pretty good. And when you look at the ratios for all the school districts, this is kind of what they are. It's Clint ratios, El Paso, Fabens, San Eli, Isleta, Anthony, Canutillo, Tornillo, and Socorro. I'll leave it up there for a little while. If anybody has any questions? Yes, sir.
Ms. Charles, do you have a question?
Yes, sir.
So, at the last board meeting, I know there were, Dinah, your report, we were talking about the 94% versus the 95%. Is this what we're talking about?
Yes, sir.
Here?
Yes, sir. This is it. We have for EPISD, Mr. Velarde and Mr. Taylor, we've already submitted our protest to the comptroller's office in a timely manner with our evidence, and Bill will go over that a little bit to protest the stratification that they've done on on the properties in EPISD. That's the only one that fell out of confidence.
So this is the one that falls below the 1, correct?
Right. You see your B category is 0.79. And then if you look at your F1 category, it's 0.82. F1 commercial is usually around, always low. But for the multifamily, that's what threw off the total number. It came at a 0.90. I think it was 9010 or 9090, so right under 91%. So we did gather all the data and did the research and came up with what we feel like the PTAD, Property Tax System Division, can review and look at. We've attached evidence and submitted the protest, so we'll wait to hear from them. They received it timely.
So then it is the state comptroller's office that calculates all this.
Yes, sir.
We don't have any role in
No, sir.
calculations.
Is that being done also for Isleta?
Yes, sir, for Isleta. If you look at Isleta's, everybody
Isleta's
came
right
in
here.
at the good numbers.
Yeah,
Even
on
though
the B's
Isleta's,
are 94.
right, even though
they're at
Isleta
83.
commercial was 0.83, overall you were still at the 95%. So you fell within the state
the confidence
comptroller's confidence level, yes,
So each one of these lines then are different categories that were...
of property, yes, sir. Mhm.
Why would
Right.
we, I mean, I take a look at Isleta and I take a look at El Paso. Why would there be, let's look at multifamily residences.
It was a sampling that they take within your school district. It's the properties that they pull to sample. They do a random sampling of properties within your school district. They don't compare them to another school district. They look strictly at your school district.
Sure. I just find it interesting that there's such a huge disparity between two neighboring districts.
That's comptroller's way that they choose their. They don't compare district to district. They look at each district individually. Yeah.
Understood, but
Yeah.
you know, the finished product.
It depends on what they pulled. I mean, we don't.
We have no control over that.
Right. We have no control over the properties that they pull. They do it. Supposed to do a random.
We did, but we don't.
Right.
I know El Paso
Yeah.
ISD has the largest portion of the percentage of commercial.
Yes, you do.
And I'm going to also guess we probably have the largest of multifamily. Or close to.
Not so much, but not as much as you had. You probably still are the lead, but not as much. Socorro has really, and
Right.
Canutillo have picked
But
up.
when you compare, I mean, the two land masses,
You can't
age,
compare them.
You know, the
Yeah.
age of, I mean, obviously El Paso has the oldest properties.
Right. You can't compare them to other school districts. They don't do any comparison whatsoever to other school districts. So I would advise you not to, because it will not make any sense. They don't compare
No,
one
it's
school
random.
district. They looked at each one individually and come up within properties within that. And I'm gonna let Bill go on. He's gonna show you some of the things, some of the examples of what they do pull, so you can see that.
If I may continue.
Any more questions? Please feel free to ask us anything, board members. This is just a very informal presentation
Judging by
for
the
you.
growth in Socorro and as well as Canutillo, I would imagine those numbers are skewed already.
They met the confidence level in Socorro and in Canutillo.
This was as of,
This was for 2018 values. They do it every other year, so they'll do another study in 2020.
2020.
Just before you go on, what happens when you don't meet the confidence level?
When we don't meet the confidence level, then we file a protest, which we've done. We look at all of the properties that they used in their study, and then we come up with evidence to either get that thrown out or to get it changed. And that's all submitted to the Property Tax Assistant Division of the Comptrollers to review. That's what the process is right now, and Bill will go through that a little bit more in his presentation. But that's where we are right now. Then they will get back with us, hopefully accepting all of our information and making a change. If they don't make a change, then we go before SOA with our data, and they go with their data, and then SOA makes a decision, which is your local administrative judge.
ALJ, the ALJ.
Yeah, your LJ.
The worst case scenario, if we don't make that 95%, what happens?
We go to, well, what they do is they
After
put
all
you,
of those.
after everything, for 1 year, they put you in a grace period, and then the following year, they do another study, and then we start the process all over again.
I think what Mr. Velarde is asking is, what are the consequences? We get all through that.
School funding
and
gets
never-
adjusted.
You're held harmless the first year. So even if we fail in our appeal to the state right now, nothing's going to happen to the school district.
Right.
Now, what will happen is instead of our next study being in 2020, they'll do a study this year in 2019.
For EPISD only.
EPISD only. And if we still are not able to get you within the confidence interval, then the school district will become penalized. And what they'll do is they'll say the amount of local property taxes that you raised would be like at 90% of your value instead of at 100% of your value. So they'd say, like, instead of collecting property taxes on like $15 billion, well, you should have collected property taxes of $17.5 billion or whatever. So they'll only give you aid down to that level instead of down to the level that you're actually at. Because all the school districts in El Paso County are considered property poor school districts to TEA. So you all are net beneficiaries of state aid. So what they do is they look at your weighted average daily attendance and your property value per school district, and however much you're short from the state goal, the state makes up for that with aid. So basically, if you fail a second year, they're going to say, well, you're saying that you only collected this much in property taxes, but you should have collected this much. So when we make up your difference, we're only going to make it up from this level and not from this level. So you lose the difference in state aid between what you actually taxed at and what the state is saying you should have taxed at.
What some school districts will do if they find that they're in a grace period and the next year they fall out again is they'll hire a law firm that specializes in that to help fight those values. We feel very, very confident with the information. The fact that we were four percentage points off shows that we have a lot of information they did not have. And if I can let Bill, he'll kind of go over some of the issues that we saw.
I still have questions. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, no, keep your questions.
That's fine. That's fine. Okay.
This is a big discussion. That's why we put this at the end.
Exactly. And this is the EPISD worksheet, and I highlighted 79% and the 82%. By contrast, if you look at the 2016 PVS results, on the Bs we're at 98% in EPISD and 100% in the Fs. Now, why is that? Well, I can tell you the answer. In 2016, we had a very experienced PTAD appraiser who had over 20 years with PTAD, and that's where our categories were at 98 and 100%. This year on the 2018 PVS, we have a much less experienced PTAD appraiser, which is less, he's been there less than 5 years with PTAD, so you're seeing these low ratios dip all of a sudden. And experience makes the difference.
Now, one thing I want to point out to the board is these are not based on sales of property. These are based on appraisals.
A lot of them are.
Most of them are. So we're not talking about that there was an objective sale that we're comparing these property ratios to. We're talking about the opinion of the appraiser from the property tax division on what that appraised value should be versus what our appraiser's opinion is of what the appraised value should be.
So my only concern, and I'm sorry, because it's our district that we're questioning, and forgive me please, but I got to get this straightened up.
Sure.
Because all that discussion that you just gave it makes it sound like EPISD has a role in this because we're getting penalized, and yet what role does EPISD or any district have to raise those numbers when it's the comptroller who's making these counts? Right. What can EPISD do other than hire an attorney to fight this? What can EPISD do?
That's it. You have no role in their
Or
study.
hold the appraiser accountable.
Right. Yeah, there's really no role in it with the school districts. They do. It's like an audit that they come in and do, and we all have to abide by their audit. Now, what we do is we gather all of our information, and Bill's got some examples of some things where they made obvious errors that when we go in and ask them to either correct it or remove it from the study. We've already, for EPISD, we've already visited with EPISD Finance Accounting Department and have given them all of this information. We visited with them immediately as soon as you guys found out, the school district found out, and we found out, and we asked them, do you want us to go through this process or do you want to hire an attorney? And the superintendent chose to let us go through this process first to see if we can't get you back in confidence level. So that's where we are right now. And again, like David said, you're held harmless the first year. It's a grace period, which gives us a chance to do this protest and get this information to the comptroller's office.
One of the drawbacks of using the attorneys is the attorneys that deal in this situation, usually in the first year, they're not concerned about it because the school district is held harmless. So unless the confidence, the appraisal level of the appraisal district drops below 85%, usually they're content just to let it ride out the first year because nothing's going to happen to the school district. And then if there's still an issue the second year, that's when they fight it. But our take on it is we'd rather get it taken care of the first year, because if there's some actionable thing that we can get the property tax division to adjust in our favor, that's better, because we don't know what's going to happen the second year. Maybe there's going to be a legitimate reason why we fail the study. We could possibly fail the study in the second year, and if there's nothing that you can do in the second year to fix it, then we're in trouble, because then the school district is going to get penalized. So our take is that we should be more aggressive, and as soon as the issue arises in this first year, to try to get it corrected instead of waiting to see what's going to happen in the second year.
Mr. Rose, I don't know if it's possible, but I would be interested in seeing the information that was provided to finance over at EPISD, because
it's the property value study itself is on the comptroller's website for every school district, so you can go in and look at it. And
okay, but I want to understand, for me, the specific concern is, what was it that you are using to counter the appraisal being at 94%? Because right now it's EPISD.
I'll show examples. I mean, we did objections. We did over 800 objections on EPISD.
Right. But
You know, I mean, it's a huge files. They're huge files.
and I understand that you're talking about huge files, but we're probably talking about millions of dollars to EPISD. And right now it's only EPISD, but I believe that my function on this board is to make sure that everybody gets the money that they're entitled to, and if not, to make sure that it's being corrected. Right now, I have to trust that that's being done, but I also trusted that it was being done before, and now it's at 94%. So now I want to be a bit more informed. Ms. Earls, if that's possible,
I don't know
I
how
would
we
be
could,
interested.
those files, I mean, we
And I
could-
don't,
what
I don't
we
know if
can
it's the
do
whole
is-
files. I just, you know, I mean, I want to understand this better
Now, you can-
because,
If it can happen to EPISD, it can happen to any.
Right.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, and every 2 years they do a property value study, and so we've been really lucky that we've stayed within the confidence level. But it does happen, and it's based on a lot of issues with the comptrollers. We'd like to kind of show some of the other stuff on the study because he's getting to some of the changes that you guys can see.
Just to throw a little bit more mud in what you're saying. You know, these things that are being proposed right now, they're attacking the Robin Hood approach, aren't they?
Yes, in the legislation they are.
That's what I'm saying. Now,
Yeah.
of course, there we don't know which way it's going to go.
We don't.
But more than likely, the powers to be, in my opinion, are going to make it happen for their benefit, of which it's going to have a big impact on us.
Oh, yeah.
That's why we react immediately on the property value study if somebody's out. We don't wait the grace period. We want to go ahead and get it taken care of the first year it's on here. Now, the files, what we can do is we can provide a link that then you can link into and see all the files. But if you go onto the comptroller's website under the 2018 property value study, you will see, you can go into your individual school district and it will give you a list of all of the properties that they used, the stratification that they did, how they did their ratios. All that is on their website per school district. So you can go into, I think it's www.windows.Texas.
I have the website at the end, which
all
is
right,
the
yeah.
Comptroller General website, but you can
And
access
we're gonna,
it through there.
if y'all want a copy of this presentation, we can make sure that we send it to you.
See, because the way I understand it, I'm sorry, Ms. Earls,
Go
is
ahead.
that, Mr. Velada, that basically EPISD got 94% of the funding that they should have from
No,
property
no, no.
tax.
Oh, no. They're still getting their funding. They're getting their funding. That hasn't changed at all.
That's why the explanation would be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Well,
not being
not this year.
utilized yet.
Not this year.
Right.
Now, my last question, and I'll let you continue, but when PTAD, because obviously I got to say, all that's been presented and all these coefficients and all that, again, I never was a math major, so that's hard to follow. But when PTAD did their, I guess their appraisals, are they using our information to do
No.
it, or are they coming in and using
They're getting
theirs?
information that we don't have
get-
access
right,
to.
Yes, exactly.
They're getting sales that we don't have, that they have access to
And
through
they probably have
MLS.
MLS, exactly. They probably have MLS and we don't.
And we
So
don't.
That's
So,
a pretty
and
big advantage.
We do an open records request for all of that data, but they don't send it to us until after the value study has been released. Then they'll give us the information under an open records request, but not till it's
a bigger
released.
question because, again, the powers to be in the state of Texas always maneuver and do what they want to do. And when you say, well, we don't know where they're getting their information, well, I mean, we're just like little ducks here.
Every county in the state of Texas is that way. I mean, every
Yeah, we're not the
appraisal
only
district
ones.
and every school district
not
is
the
that
only
way.
ones,
Yeah, we're not,
There's the
unfortunately,
haves.
yeah.
The point here is there are the haves and the have-nots.
Right.
We just happen to fall in this category down here.
And the way the property value study is determined is by state legislation and comptroller rule. So we have no say on it. It is, the
playing their
state
game.
lawmakers have put this into play through the property tax code, which is state law, and then the comptroller's office is the one that sets up the procedures and the rules. So, yeah, we respond to
We're
that.
playing their game, their rules.
Ms. Kilgore, for clarification, what I'm hearing is that the property value study was sent to you, was sent to all of us. EPISD's was not what it should be. You acknowledged that, and you've now sent it back to their court, or it's still?
It's in their court. We
Okay,
sent,
so
we
you
sent
sent
over
the
800.
corrections and all what needs to
The
happen.
request, yes.
Right.
And it all went back to them now.
Now we're waiting for their
We're
response
waiting.
on our, yeah.
I get all of that.
Okay.
I do. My problem is and that's why I asked the question, what worst case scenario, nothing changes, EPISD is held accountable for this, and yet I don't know what EPISD can do or this CAD can do other than
Nothing.
protest it to change this or to affect a change.
We go to court.
And when you talk to it about a penalty,
Yeah.
and when you talk about confidence levels, that terminology is suggesting that EPISD has some kind of role, or any district has some kind of role.
But you don't.
We don't.
It's
We
the other
don't.
way around.
No,
How do
there's
we-
nothing in legislation that allows, other than to allow a school district to file their own protest. Now, one thing a school district can do is, as the year goes through and your value is adjusted because of protests or exemptions, I think it's twice a year, David, or once a year, your school district files with the comptroller's office to recoup some of the funding that was lost. So that is one way that you have to get some funding, but it's based on changes on the tax roll, not based on this. So the worst case scenario, if we fail on this, then we go to court to a SOA judge, to the ALJ, and present our case, and they present their case. If the ALJ goes against the appraisal district and goes with the comptroller's office, then you're in grace period for 1 year. You're not going to lose anything. So then next year we fight it all over again. They do a whole new study, the Property Tax Assistance Division. They do a whole new study for EPISD, and we do the process all over again. If at that point they still don't accept our numbers, and I'll tell you this, I'll be honest with you, I've never had them not accept, the numbers that we provided them because we provide them data. We provide them appraisals that we have on file. We provide them sales that we have. We provide them with documentation and data that then they can go in and look at, just like in a lawsuit with the appraisal district and a property owner. When that property owner provides us with the data, we see, okay, we have that data so we can make our changes. The same thing happens with the comptroller's office. When you see the comptroller's office or the judge not doing anything, it's when nobody did any kind of protest, nobody provided anything, they did not follow the procedures, they did not work with the comptroller's office. We've been on the phone multiple times with the people from the comptroller's office, from the PTAD, working with them. I'm not going to say 100% of the time, and that it's always this way because there's always that glitch, but we've never had any issue with them once we've done this because we've given them data to look at. The ones that do have issues and the ones that do end up in trouble is because they provide nothing. They don't file protests. They don't provide anything. They let the school district sink or swim on their own. We don't do that. We fight.
And normally, when we get the property value study and we see something that is out of whack like this, we'll go back for the next year and modify our appraisal plan, a reappraisal plan, so that we can look at this school district again and reappraise all the properties that, according to the state, says that we were wrong on. So we're not just going to sit back and wait 1 more year and see what happens next year. We're going to go back and we're going to look at El Paso ISD and reappraise it again.
Yeah, we're very active
in
doing this.
I guess I just need clarity. When they do this PVS, I'll get the acronyms here. They do or they do not use our appraisals for that.
No, they use their own.
No, they derive their own values.
They're comparing theirs to ours, their value to our value.
So they do all of their own. They send out well, like Bill was telling you, for 2018 they sent out a new field appraiser to do commercial properties. A couple of years ago they had a brand new person doing residential that we had some issues with, that we were able to give information to that new appraiser and to the state. So the problem is with the PTAD is there's a lot of turnover, and so it's like training somebody new. The way we train it is we send them our documentation. When they come in, they pull a property record. That's all they pull, and then they go out and they pick whatever properties they want, and they do their own thing. They don't use any of our data other than our record to get them out there.
And there's been multiple times they go out and look at the wrong property. They
Yes.
don't even go by and look at the right property. So these people are here for a couple of weeks, and they come in and they get the records, and they'll go out and even look at the wrong property. We'll show examples of that. So they're appraising the wrong property. So we have to go in and correct that and show them what the right property is.
Yeah.
There'll be numerous times
Bill,
that.
Bill should show some
Yeah.
examples.
Bill,
Is
go
it
ahead.
the same appraiser who is evaluating EPISD against the SLEDA against?
Yes.
Yeah.
On the commercial
It's not
properties, yes.
against the school districts.
No.
Understood.
Yeah.
Going
He
to-
did. He
It's the
did all
same
the B's and the F's.
So what we're saying here is that one appraiser messed up.
That one
with
appraiser
EPISD,
did.
but didn't mess up with
Well,
SLEDA.
if you look at the ratios, I mean, like YISD, they got in, but their ratios were also kind of low, but they got in. We're not going to appeal it because we're in. I can tell you, I looked at some of those that they did, and I saw errors in that too. But there's no reason to appeal it since we're in the study.
Yeah, when you're in the confidence level, you want to leave alone because we're in. So if we start messing with it, we could end up being out. So, Bill, go ahead and
Okay,
kind of
thank you.
click on. Let's show a few more things.
Yes.
I mean, a quick, if you can go back to the chart that showed all the school districts, I guess the four major school districts under F1, the four largest are all under 95%, right?
And they
You have-
usually are in commercial properties.
Yeah, typically.
Very rarely have we gotten in the 90 percentile
92s and
range. We
92s.
did in 2 years
Those are
ago
92.
in commercial properties when we had a very knowledgeable and experienced appraiser. The reason being with commercial is there's hardly any sales, so it's all appraisals, and it's one person's opinion versus another person's opinion. So then what we do on those, if you're out of the confidence level, like EPISD is, then we go in and we look at all the appraisals that they had. We look to see how accurate they were. We have one that Bill's going to show you where it's 2 parcels and they only included 1. So that's the kind of information. But in like Clint, they're at 88.888, but overall they made the 95% confidence level.
Right.
So as long as they're in the confidence level, that's all the PTAD cares about.
I guess, I mean, assuming, like, let's say that the comptroller is correct, just for argument's sake. So all the school districts, even though that the 4 major ones are all under the 95% threshold, but when you look at the residential values, for Clint, they're at 98, Isletta's at 99, almost 100%, Socorro's over 100%. I mean, it seems to me that the number that probably got EPISD more in trouble is the fact that the residential is barely at 95 because it comprises the vast majority of the value. I mean, so it's just that there's a prevailing belief that commercial property here in El Paso is undervalued.
It is.
Does this, I mean, and does this confirm that, considering that the 4 large districts are all under the 95% threshold, but property owners in those districts, they're not under the threshold. We're paying 100% of what we should be.
Yeah, but the whole problem with the appraisal process is information. We can't do anything without information. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, for residential, there's a lot of information compared to commercial. Residential property is selling all the time, so it's easy to go out and get sales. But we get sales within the city limits, but there's not very many sales out in the county. So we run into the same issue on residential in the county. But what information is there on commercial property? They don't post their sales to MLS. They don't voluntarily give their income and expense information. They don't give their business information unless they're forced to. So we have no information on commercial properties, and neither does the state. One of the problems that we're having with these appraisals from the state is they're partially using information from other areas of the state, like Dallas, that are not applicable to El Paso County. And the biggest problem with commercial is we could go tomorrow and jack up all of our commercial properties by 15%. And then when they go to the ARB and then they say, you raised my property value 15%, what evidence do you have? And what are we going to tell them? Well, the state told us that we were 15% too low. Well, where's your proof? And what proof are we going to have to show them? So what is the ARB going to do? The ARB is going to lower their values. The other issue we have is they all have agents. You know, the residential property owners usually don't have agents because it's not economically advantageous for the agents to do residential property, because how much money are you going to get from a homeowner? The commercial property owners usually take, their agents do a percentage fee basis, so you get property tax professionals that their sole purpose in life is to put doubt in the mind of the ARB to get the commercial property values lower. And if that fails, then they go to district court, where it's going to be a he said, she said situation, where the appraisal district says, well, I think the value is this, and I have this outside appraisal firm that backs me up, and the property owner's agent is going to say, well, I have an appraiser that backs me up, and we say that the property value is lower, and most of the time the judge just says, I'll split the baby in the middle.
Right. No. I mean, we're familiar with the process, but I mean, it's just, you know, we invest in things like CoStar. Last month, what was it, Trek, or what was it?
Trap. And you know what?
I mean, but that's, I guess, it's just,
that helps us.
We're investing in these tools to provide you with more commercial. And at what point do we evaluate and say that maybe these things aren't giving us the information that they're?
Well, they are.
They are.
They are giving us the information, because when we start our hearing process, I will tell you right now, our ratios for commercial properties are at 95% or 98%. They're good. During the hearing process, though, as the agents come in hour after hour, day after day, and have their hearings on their commercial properties, have to bring in any evidence. There's nothing that requires the preponderance of evidence. We have to give where we came up with our value. So we use CoStar. We'll be using TREP this year. We'll be using a commercial cost modifier from Marshall & Swift. We use that information. And hopefully the quasi-judicial board will listen to our evidence and see that it has more preponderance than the other. Where we lose that ratio is during the hearings. Because before we start the hearings, we'll be right on. Now, one of the things that state legislature has passed is, we know that we had really good evidence and the ARB didn't grant it. We went to file, they filed a lawsuit, whatever reason it is, we go to the next year, and unless we have something new in the way of evidence, we can't just raise the value based on the evidence from the prior year. They've made that in legislation. There's law, I don't remember the section right now, but unless we have new substantial evidence to show an increase, just because we know it's wrong and the evidence we had last year was right, we can't raise it because it was in a official hearing, an ARB hearing or a court case. So I'm going to be very honest with you, with the board. Legislation has our hands tied. For appraisal districts, there's only so much we can do. And when you see these numbers, they are kind of an audit of where our numbers are. Historically, our commercials have always been in the 80s. 2 years ago, we had a very experienced PTAD appraiser that brought them up a little bit higher into the higher 80s or the lower 90s. But getting information on commercial properties, we will always be, no matter what tools we use. Now, we do know that, thank you very much for the TREP, because we just found out Comptroller has purchased TREP. And they're going to be using TREP on their value studies. And that's your financial information. And so we'll be having that also. So we'll be able to say what financial, I mean, if you're using the same services, which one? Now, where we don't have information is from MLS. But with CoStar, with LoopNet, we have a shopping center guideline that we use. We have an apartment one that we use. And I will tell you this, when we redid the apartments a couple of years ago, revalued the apartments based on this publication that we have that showed income data and sales information, we held as close as we could, but the ARB adjusted all the values, a lot of the values there. Some of them we did, we'll come to the board to file a lawsuit. Normally, 99% of the time, the property owner is going to file the lawsuit, and then we just come in. There's nothing that forces a property owner to give us that information at a hearing. They're supposed to bring in information, but it's up to the appraisal district to provide the value documentation first. So Commissioner Pettis, you're right. We will always struggle with commercial properties.
So as we go forward with the reappraisal that's going to take place now, I mean, it's primarily residential, and there
No,
isn't
it's
much
commercial. We'll be looking at for commercial. We always look at commercial properties every year, even when it's not a reappraisal. Commercial properties, we'll be looking at warehouses. We'll be looking at fast food restaurants. We'll be looking at convenience stores. We'll be looking at our ratios on our hotels, on our apartments to see where we are. Yes, sir. No, we will be looking at those. Definitely. Every year we do that to try to get that ratio to hold.
How does current costs compare to market values? Like, I mean, I'm looking at commercial, real estate up there, right? And if I've got an apartment building and right across the street, I'm going to build another one just like it, can a comparison be made between the two? I mean,
of course. We do. We compare. That's part of what we have to do. One of
the reason I ask is because, I mean, like, the Socorro School District is building a lot in our district. So, I think we could probably be considered commercial property. I think Isleta has a bond, they're building as well, and there's probably a cost per square foot. I mean,
we do. We look at three
and
approaches.
If you submit a request to us, we don't have a choice. We can't say no. Look it up on MLS. I mean, you submit a request. We have to.
Oh no, you give us
information.
We submit a request to all of the government entities when they buy property, asking them for the sales information. If we know appraisals are out there, we submit requests to all of the government entities asking for sales information, even with the state land office. Funny thing about state land office is they redact everything. But what we do, there's three approaches that we look at. Yeah. For market value, we look at market value. We look at three approaches. The cost approach, what it costs to build, and then any historical depreciation that may have to be. We look at the income, what are their rents, what are their expenses, and then if there's any sales, we try to look at sales. So then we determine a market value. But the state of Texas also allows an equity issue, an equity value. And so a property owner can come in, and if another property received a lower value based on a court case, then they can be compared with that lower value. That's that downward spiral that we always talk about, that we're trying to get legislation to tighten up on that. So we do look at all of the comparables. I mean, that's what we have to do. But we look at it by categories. So we'll categorize hotels of a certain price range. We'll categorize apartments by certain amenities. So all of that with every school district is looked at. And we do that every year with commercial properties. So yeah, no, we definitely, that is part of what we have to do on our ratio studies. And that's what the state does in a random sampling. So yes, we do. We do that, Mr. Nahara, definitely.
Well, the efficacy of the tools that you're providing to us is evidenced by, there's basically two reasons why how people protest their property. Either they say the market value is incorrect, or it's being unequally appraised with other similar properties. We have pretty much eliminated the market value excuse that their property is not being appraised at market value. And the reason that we're able to do that is in part due to all the tools that you all have given us, because we can show that the commercial properties are not being overappraised as far as market value goes. And that's why most of our commercial protests now are resting on unequal appraisal. And the problem that we're having on unequal appraisal is they're supposed to find a representative sample of similar properties properly adjusted. And we've discussed many times how the malls are trying to compare themselves to Fox Plaza and Sunland Park instead of comparable malls to themselves. And the issue, I think, is one of educating the ARB and having them take a closer look at some of these comparisons and say, are you really going to compare the outlet mall to Fox Plaza? Are they really similar properties? Now, theoretically, you can adjust any property to any other property, but the more the adjustment, the less of a comparable property it is.
And here's a good example, Mr. Nahara, that you were talking about. We had a hotel that we knew the construction cost was over $18 million to build that hotel. It was published in the newspaper several times. It was out there. when it came down to it, they were able to protest for a value and go before a mediation, because they filed a lawsuit based on equity and got that adjusted down to 10 million. And what the state property, the property value study that PTAD is telling us now, that unless you actually go to court, go to trial, which is very expensive, as we all know, they used to, if a lawsuit was filed, they used to take those out of the study automatically. If they accidentally used one, they would take it out. Now they're keeping them in the study as part of the study. The only way they're taking them out is if it actually goes to trial with a jury, or a judge makes a decision during a trial. If through mediation we come to an agreement and we have an agreed judgment that we all sign, they're leaving that in the property value study, which of course then skews it, because that was an agreement based on a particular issue. So there are a lot of issues, and unfortunately it all goes back to what can you change, Mr. Velarde, like you were saying, what can you do? Get the law to change. You know, somehow with your school finance, get them to quit holding school districts hostage by, you know, on the dollars that they send you. That's the only place you're going to find where it actually will change. In the meantime, we just fight the battle and get you out of the issue. Okay, let Bill give you a couple of examples of some of the things
There's
that
some
we
examples of PTAD's errors on the PVS. And here's some appraisal errors. The first one is this property. It's at 43% ratio. It's South Mesa Hills, the Retreat at Mesa Hills Apartments, or the Colinas del Sol. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that property or not, but that's in the property value study. And I know it's hard to read, but I'll show this on the next slide. But this is actually the PTAD's record with their deal, and on this next slide it shows how many units they have. 752 units is what they use to calculate their income value. The 752 units is for both accounts, and they actually used one account instead of both, so that skews it. Also, we have actual income data, and that would reduce the value a lot more, so that's what we are pursuing. And you can see they included this account, but they didn't include this account. So that's a pretty big,
it's all one apartment complex.
Yeah, pretty big omission on their part. So that's going to bring it up quite a bit, considerably. Another example is the Chase building on Main Street, or the former Chase building, I should say, since they moved out in 2017. This is the PTAD record, and I'll blow this up, but it's showing the net rentable area and the rate that they're using, which they're using 386,356 square foot of NRA, net rentable area, at $15 a foot. Now, according to their marketing, they're asking $13 a foot, and they have a net rentable area of 351,270 square feet. That's actually reduces the potential gross rent by about 1.23 million, and it does not include the other adjustments such as additional vacancy, additional expenses, and a higher cap rate since Chase Bank moved out in 2017. Now I'm going to show you some sales errors, because they did put some sales in there, and I think they probably will regret it. The first one is the CVS Pharmacy right here on Montana on Shelmont. Ratio's at 57%. The sale was an off-market transaction, and it occurred in March of 2018. And the study is for January 1 of 2018. Now, when you look at, I blew up that portion that it says the sale is an off-market transaction. It was not exposed to the open market, so it's not a market sale. And the transaction was in March of 2018. The building was not completed as of January 2018. And you can see in this photo, that's the condition on January 2nd, 2018. It still needed quite a bit of work to finish up. And they put that sale in the study, so we're requesting that it be removed. The next one is a property on 500 West Paisano in downtown. This is their record. I don't know if you can read it or not, but that's shows Paisano, and going back to the ratio, it's a 55% ratio. This is the actual sale document that we have, and the address is showing 901 Santa Fe Street. So you can see that they put the sale on the wrong property. They didn't get the right property. They think it's this property, when in reality, it's this and 2 other parcels, actually. So we're requesting that that sale be removed since it's not even the property they said it was. The next example is the former Lamplighter Lounge, which I'm sure everybody passes by it on the way to church. So, basically, who purchased it was Iglesia Familia del Paso, which is a church. So it's not a market transaction because it involves a religious organization. And also, they purchased it to put them out of business. So we're requesting that that be removed. And the last example that I have is the former Motel 6 right here on the Gateway in Reynolds. I don't know if y'all know this, but apparently it was purchased by the county hospital. And is this a good sale? Well, no, but PTAD thinks it's a good sale. It's a sale of a governmental entity. And that's why when I used to work the property value study, I was very rare to put sales in there because there was usually something wrong with those sales. But yet they go in there and put a bunch of sales that are not market transactions. So we're requesting that one be removed as well. And this is their procedures. Field appraiser procedure for PTAD. Their procedure 2.4, confirm and verify sales types of invalid sales pursuant to IAAO standard and racial studies, section A.4.1. The following types of sales are often found to be invalid for racial studies: sales involving governmental agencies and public utilities, sales involving charitable, religious, or educational institutions. So they're violating their own procedures by adding those sales. So is that a valid study? So in conclusion, for the PVS, we know the local data and information much better than PTAD. I mean, their appraisers come in 1-2 weeks every other year. We're here 24/7, 365 days a year. And, you know, once they do their 2-week thing, they go to another city and appraise other properties. Also, the CAD uses mass appraisal. We assign values per property categories rather than a specific property. That's what we're mass appraisers. Also, the CAD must consider equity per the Texas Constitution. And PTAD makes many assumptions. And the result is a skewed property value study. Now, any questions before I move on to the methods and assistance program? Okay. What is the methods and assistance program? It's a reviewing of appraisal district's governance, taxpayer assistance, operating procedures, and appraisal standard procedures and methodology. It is more general than the PVS. It involves most of the appraisal district departments as well as the board of directors. And who does the methods and assistance program review? The Comptroller's Property Tax Assistance Division, or PTAD, is responsible for conducting the map. And it is done every other year on a non-PVS year. Now, there are 2 types of guidelines for the map. One is the Tier 1, and the other are mandatory guidelines. And what is Tier 1? PTAD divides appraisal districts by 3 tiers. The smallest appraisal district, which is less than 20,000 population, are Tier 3, and they have the fewest questions. The mid-sized appraisal districts are between 20,000 and 120,000 population. They are Tier 2 rather. They have more questions than Tier 3 and less than Tier 1. The largest appraisal districts are over 120,000 population, are Tier 1, and they have the most questions. And of course, El Paso is, by definition, is a large appraisal district, so it is Tier 1 district. Tier 1 guidelines, and these are questions that are not pass-fail. They are score-based questions. You can miss some of them and still pass the map review. However, a low score could be a fail in the map review. Mandatory guidelines. These guidelines must be answered with a yes or the appraisal district fails the map review. It is equivalent to a death sentence. It is very unforgiving. These mandatory guidelines have to be followed to the letter. And this is just an example of one of their forms. It shows the mandatory questions and then the other parts of the activities. And then it gives the pass-fail and then the ratings. That's just for your information, just the form that they use. So I don't know if you guys want to look at it or not. It's kind of hard to see. But.
Yeah. They have a copy of our last maps.
Okay. All right, so that's similar.
Yes.
Okay. Map review recommendations. There are typically a means to correct any deficiencies found after a map review. Mandatory deficiencies must be corrected in order to pass a map review. Typically, these corrections have to be made prior to the release of the final map review report. And the final map review report is normally released in September. And just remember, a recommendation, they say recommendation, but it is a mandatory requirement. We don't have a choice. They make it sound like you have a choice, but you really don't if you want to pass a map review. And what happens if an appraisal district fails a map review? The comptroller's office must refer those districts to the Texas Department of Licensing and Registration, or TDLR, and penalties by TDLR may apply. So it's best to implement the map recommendations to avoid any referral to TDLR. And in summary, PTAD comes in after the battle and bayonets the wounded.
So with the MAPS review, we've always passed our MAPS review. The MAPS review, they go in and they look at not just, they don't look at the value, that's with the property value study, but they look at the procedures from the time they walk in the door all the way up to the board of directors. They look at our finance, they look at our HR, they look at our appraisal review board, they review everything. When we got our report on the property value study this year, at the same time, the MAPS reviewer was here on site for a week doing his reviews. So whenever he finishes up he's gone, of course, he was here for a week. He'll submit kind of like a clerical error report. He'll submit a report saying with recommendations, and if we get those done right away, then it doesn't show up on the maps and we pass. So anytime a recommendation has been done, the only recommendations we've ever really had is more of a procedural. We had an A or B member that refused, a board of director member that refused to take the open meetings, open records. So we got dinged on that. Now, that was not a pass-fail. It was just one of the other questions that they asked. So we were okay, but it's usually that type of a thing.
And this is the PTAD website.
There's the
general
website
right
if
there.
y'all want to. Would anybody want a copy of all this presentation? We've got it on where we can email it. If you'll let us know.
Happy if you just send us the website.
You would like one?
Just the website.
Oh, just the website? Okay, sure. Yeah, you bet. We can do that. We'll send the board members a copy of the comptroller's website for you to look on.
Okay.
Mr. Velarde and Mr. Taylor, to let you know, we've submitted, like Bill said, over 8,000.
800.
800, I'm sorry. I like the 8,000 better.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, 800 objections. It's over
800 objections for the study that they did on EPISD. We feel very confident. Mr. Thompson and Mr. Gonzalez have been in phone conversations with the supervisors and managers of PTAD and have talked with them. And they've assured us, send us documentation that we can look at and hang our hat on, and then we'll get back to you. So we feel very good about it, and we keep up with, in fact, we have a meeting with EPISD Finance next week to go over what we've seen so far. The results of the property value study, we won't get probably for
Maybe mid-April.
April, yeah, mid-April, end of April before we get the results, but we will stay on top of it, definitely.
And if
It's
you
a
get
shame
any
there's-
information, I know you'll
Yeah.
report it
Oh,
to
definitely.
As soon as we
Oh,
find
yeah.
something out.
When we get the final results on the property value study for EPSD, we'll bring it before the board. The other school districts, like I said, are in confidence level, but when we get the results on EPISD, we'll make a presentation. And you're exactly right. It affects you tremendously, but you have no say in the process. It's the comptroller
Very unfortunate.
and PTAD. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, board
you.
members,
Thank you.
for allowing
Thank
our
you,
staff
staff.
to do
It was an
presentation.
excellent, everybody, I thought it was a superior presentation. Thank you very much.
However,
Yes,
the
sir?
best slide was the guys with the bayonets.
I know, yeah.
Could you send that one to Mr. Taylor?
Yeah. And then, can you turn off so we get rid of the screen? Well, hand me the white thing.
And if you decide later
the
you
white
want
thing right
this
there.
sent
The
to
remote.
y'all,
The remote?
I'm sure you
Yeah.
can call
The
and they'll
remote,
send
thank
it.
you. You have to hit it twice. Okay, there you go. Thank you.
That-
Yeah.
Okay,
The white thing. I know the remote. Thank you, Mr. Nahara. That's the only
that'll
white
take
thing over there.
us to the taxpayer liaison
Technical terms,
report.
right?
Good
Technical
evening, Ms.
terms,
Carter.
yeah.
Good evening, Board of Directors. Tracy Carter, Taxpayer Liaison Officer. As y'all can see, blue is my favorite color, so I left a blue folder in front of you all. And inside of it, the ARB had sessions in January, and I did receive 3 taxpayer comments. I was able to address the issues with the property owners, except for one. They did not leave their phone number for me to talk to. But inside, you'll see the outcome of each hearing. And I was honored to attend the TAAD conference in Austin this year. And inside, you'll see the presentations that they presented for the Board of Directors. The first one will be the public records and public meetings, which every CAD should know. The second one that I know you all heard a lot about, the top 10 responsibilities for CAD Board of Directors. And the other ones I put in there that I thought might be an interest to you all. Demographic characteristics and trends in Texas and Texas counties, the economic outlook of real estate investors, and the big litigation, fight or flight. Well, this month, coming in April, the ARB has a lot going on. At the end of March, they'll be in session to hear late protest, motion to correct. On April 1st, the ARB will meet to adopt the 2019 rules and procedures. On April the 3rd, the chairman and the secretary of the Appraisal Review Board will meet with the tax agents and with Central Appraisal District appraisers concerning the rules and procedures that the ARB set forth for 2019. On April 23rd and 24th, the ARB will have their state comptroller training. And I'm really excited to say that our local administrative judge is interested in attending this. So we let her know that we have openings, that she's more than welcome to come to the training. And on April 25th, the ARB will have their meetings with John Traybold, he's the MAI appraiser, and with Roy Armstrong, the ARB attorney, to give them more training. Thank you. Do you all have any questions?
Hearing none, thank you very much. We appreciate you. And that would take us, Ms. Kilgore, to you, Chief Appraiser Report.
One of the things I want to let the Board of Directors know, we've already reported this to the police. It is a press release to the media, went out immediately on Monday. What we have found is that there are people out in the county knocking on doors claiming to be from the CAD. And what they're doing is they're asking the person who answers the door to let them in, to show them their ID, not the person, but the person who lives there. They're asking the person who lives there to see their ID, and then they're asking them to sign a document. So as soon as we found out about this, how we found out about it is people started calling in to our phone bank, wanting to know what our policy was for our employees, and can they just walk on in the house and ask for the property owner's identification? Well, we said, no, they definitely can't. Our employees are in a marked district car that has our logo on it. They have business cards that have their name on it, EPCAD logo, and phone numbers and address. They have two forms of identification. They have a state Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation card that they carry, and then they have a CAD identification card that has their photo on it. They have to carry that with them all of the time. They will knock on the door. Somebody comes to the door. They will address them, tell them who they are, why they are there, either because of a permit or for whatever reason, and ask for permission. We don't just go in there. So we submitted a press release. It's on our website. If you go to our website, across the banner, it says Scam Alert. And when you click on that, it goes to the press release. KFOX has, last night on the news and this morning on the news, they actually addressed it and gave the press release on the news. When we talked to the police officer, he said it is definitely a scam. We think what it is, there are companies out there that will go to homeowners and have them sign over like a power of attorney or authority for them to represent them at the appraisal district to file for an exemption. And all of the tax refund goes to these companies, and they keep it. And then they charge the property owner to do this. We think that's what it is. Also, what they're doing now is they're going in and they're telling property owners, give us your ID. Then they look to see that they own maybe a rental or another house in their name. They file an exemption on the one ID, and then they go into the Texas Department of Public Safety and change their address on their ID, on their driver's license, and then file for an exemption on that one. And we found out because a gentleman's 100% veterans exemption was being removed because of the change of address, is I didn't change my address. And we said, we got your ID that shows a different address. He goes, I never did it. And that's where we found out this company is doing. We don't know for sure who in the company is doing it, but we have reported it to the police. We have, like I said, press release went out to all the media, newspapers, the Ink, and all of the radio, the TV stations. It went out. So far, like I said, KFOX is the only one that has actually aired that press release. But it is on our website. So if you get any kind of calls from your constituents, please, please, please. What we're asking people now when they call in, we met with a police officer and he said, get them to give us an address of where they live so that we can see if it's in a certain area of the county. Is it all over the county? You know, what specifically they're asking for. We did have a woman call today and speak with Mr. Molina, a senior citizen, who said, I told him, no, I don't give my information to anybody, but she called to say, what else could she do? Unfortunately, we can't get into that part of it, but Mr. Molina did talk to her and calm her down, and she said, I'm a senior citizen, I don't give my information to anybody, which is the right thing to do. Don't give your, we will never ask for your identification out in the field unless the property owner has contacted our office and has set up an appointment, and we go out to meet them because they are invalid of some form or disabled of some form, and we're going to sign them up for an exemption. But it'll be somebody from my staff with those 3 forms: identification, business card, Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation registration card, and there's El Paso CAD, EPCAD identification with their photo on it, and they'll be in a marked CAD car. So I wanted the board to be aware of what happened this week.
Is it possible, can you contact our school districts and let them know? Because we've got a PIO, I'm sure each and every one of us, that will send out to our community. You know, be on the lookout for a scam. Because most of our communities, I know mine, you know, great-grandparents, grandparents, parents, we all don't, we
We'll
don't
send a
move
copy
lot.
of that press release to the superintendents of every school
Please.
district. Yes.
Yeah.
We definitely will.
That's horrible.
It is bad. I mean, we're very conscientious about identification and our appraisers telling people who they are. You know, when we actually say, my name is Dinah Kilgore, I'm an appraiser with the El Paso Central Appraisal District. I work for the El Paso Central Appraisal District. Here's my ID, and tell them why we're there. So it's very disheartening that someone is out there for a private benefit, for a commercial profit, and is praying. It's like the scams for the electric company, you know, that we've seen on the news. They've come up with another way. So I wanted to let the board know. The only other thing I have on my report is there's a white envelope there. It is another copy of the budget. Just a reminder, the budget went out last Friday to all of the board members and all of the taxing entities. We will have our workshop in April. The 3rd Thursday of April will be our workshop. If you have any questions whatsoever, or your entity has any questions whatsoever, and you don't have to wait till the workshop, let us know. We'll address those questions and get them to everybody. And then at the workshop, we'll look at it, you know, for everything that anybody wants to do. The committee did look at it and did review it. There is some changes that we'll do in time for the April workshop that are more of descriptive, a more detailed descriptive. One of the things we did do on this, where we have professional development, or where we have professional services, we actually broke them down with a dollar amount, so you can see, like, ward law appraisal, the officers that we hire, you know, we broke that down a little bit, so you'll see that a little bit of a change there in the budget. You can see the breakdown. Other than that, board members, I'm done.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kilgore. Thank you, board, everybody. We're done? Okay. It is, looks like 6:56 to me, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Well, comment, I like the board packet.
Do you, Rick, did you hear that?
Yeah.
They like the board packet.
I hope you'll start seeing